Sounds like you don't have enough energy. Have you guys had your lunch yet?
Yes.
Okay, never mind. Alright. Now, a very good afternoon to everybody here, and welcome to our sixth series of ICOM Master Series. Alright? Now, we are really excited to have you with us here at ICOM, and before we get started, let me introduce a few house rules. Alright, please silence your phone because we do not want anyone to interrupt our exclusive Mr. Darren to make his speech later. Alright? Now, an emergency exit is just behind you, and if you really want to go to toilet, please do now before we start. Just exit and turn to your left. Alright? And also, there is no smoking inside the recital hall. If you like to smoke or vape, please get out of ICOM. Okay, we do not want everyone to suffocate with smoke inside here. Okay, I don't want everyone to die here today, alright? And also, before we starting as well, I would like to welcome our very, very special that love ICOM so much, our Miss Irene, for her welcome note. Yes. Is it really hard to have a welcome note from Miss Irene? No? For today?
Okay, why not?
Yes, come on. Give a big clap to Miss Irene.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody, our guests, and of course our students. This session is specially brought for you, for your learning and for your engagement, and for you to take this back and in the music industry. Okay, we have today with us a very difficult person to get in touch with, and that is Mr. Darren Choy. And he has been so gracious to accept to come here today to speak with us and to share his experience about the record labels. Now, this man is a giant of record labels. Okay, he has more than 20 years in the music industry, of which he was the managing director for Warner Music Malaysia and Singapore, and EMI Malaysia as well. Okay, and then he not only served in record labels, he was also the chairman of RIM and BPM, and helping to build the music industry and the domestic labels. That's very nice of him, after having served in multinational labels, that's Warner and EMI. And then after that, he was with Adidas and Lotus F1 racing team, and has also an energy drink in the UK, right? And all of that. And currently, he is serving in a very, very senior positions in various companies, as heads of various companies. He will describe all that to you, what he's doing right now. So before I welcome him here, I'm just going to quickly tell you how this modus operandi of today's session is going to be. Normally, it's a presentation, but today it's a discussion or a moderated session. Okay, so we're going to have Darren come up, and then he will talk a little, a preamble. He'll provide you a preamble of who he is, what he has done, and what is the record label all about, business of it. And then after that, he will then be joined by Mr. Asamad, our very own. Okay, he'll come up there, be the moderator for today, and I would like you to give both of these gentlemen a rousing welcome. Okay, and then once they have gotten onto the stage, now it's all going to be about you, your questions. Some of you have already given your questions earlier on, and of course, Darren will try his level best to answer those. But from his sharing, if you find, I've got this question, raise your hand. Up high. We got a couple of microphones here. I think there are 3, 4 microphones. So please come to any one of it. The reason we wanted to come there and not just speak from where you are is so that the microphone can capture your voice, and that can come into the recording, okay, for archiving purposes. All right. Any questions? I guess not. Okay. All right. So without further ado, please join me to welcome Ms. Darren Choy.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
cool. Okay, let's go. Okay. I think I'll just introduce you a little bit.
Yeah, please.
Context. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, firstly, I'm super excited to be here because I wish this kind of thing happened more often, because usually we're kind of speculating how record labels work, and if you go on social media, there's rampant misinformation because everyone's just guessing. But today we actually have someone who was part of the music industry at a very high level in many different aspects. So we have Mr. Darren Choy, and the story was, he just actually started off as a marketing and A&R director in Sony Music. Now this was a time when Sony Music Entertainment, Celine Dion was big. Anyone remember Celine Dion? Celine Dion was big, and then Remini Nominees was big, and this was a big thing around that time. And then after that, he went to EMI Music. He was the deputy managing director first in 1997, and then he became the managing director, and that continued for 7 years, 10 months, almost 8 years. Not enough to be in music, you went to Adidas, and then you went to Lotus F1 Racing, and then you also were in a company for an energy drink in the UK, as we were talking just now. But of course, he missed music, and he came back, and he was with the Warner Music Group as a managing director from November 2011 until September 2022. This was for Warner Music Malaysia and Singapore. Most recently, he's a strategy advisor for 71 Consultancy and an executive chairman for Offspring Incorporated. So we have someone with a lot of experience here today. How it's gonna go is, I've kind of divided the questions. I know I've received questions from some of the students, and I also have a bunch of different questions. But as Ms. Irene mentioned just now, at any point, if we're discussing a particular area, if you have a question that's related to what he might be sharing, just feel free to raise your hands and ask, because we just want to get we just want to have a flow lah. Just have fun and ask questions, and basically don't go off today still with questions about any record label questions you might have. This is the right person to ask the questions. Okay? Okay, so just start.
Okay. You know what I think?
Yeah, you can just introduce
kind
yourself.
of in a way.
I feel like I feel like the mic like that. I feel like I need to play guitar as well. Like that, just like.
I think it's a lot
it's
nicer.
more.
It's also easier for me to see everyone, right? Because that's how
It's
see half of you.
it's more composition.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
So I read an article, and it said that in your words, you said you accidentally joined EMI Malaysia back in the 1990s.
Yeah.
So what led you to work in a record label? I mean, what's the story with that at the beginning?
I think when I started partying in the 80s, none of you were born, right? So during the 80s, obviously the music industry is very vibrant. It was great music. It was literally the new wave era, right? The Duran Durans of the world, the Human Leagues of the world. I think a lot of these artists you may not even know, but I think right now the great thing about Spotify and Apple Music, you will actually get to know them. So it was really through my high school days. I really enjoyed music. There are two things I really enjoyed. One was sports, and one was actually music. So interestingly enough, after graduating from US, I came back, and I started my first job. I don't think you saw that in my bio. Was that I started my first job in real estate. I was literally renting. I was renting out apartments, shops, and stuff like that. Then I realized, this is not something I would love to look at for the rest of my career. Look at the four walls, right? So I said, okay, let me do something else. So interestingly enough, at that time, Mrs. Bay was the managing director of EMI Music, and I believe Irene knows her very well because she was signed to EMI those days with her sister.
Okay.
And Mrs. Bay is another icon in the music industry. And she said, "Hey Darren, would you like to actually come for an interview, right?" I said, "What's an interview?" I said, "Oh, for Virgin Label Manager." I said, "What? Virgin Label?" I said, "I thought it was labor as in HR, right?" So I said, "No, it's not. It's like Virgin Records." I said, "Oh, Virgin Records, that's Richard Branson's music label, right?" And that was basically how I accidentally went into the music industry, right? Without saying, and because I'm not musically trained,
Okay.
and I went in there and I became the label manager. But label manager's work is such that it is really about marketing, it's about promotions, It's about getting your songs on radio, getting your songs, getting articles on at that time it was just magazines and newspapers, and getting your videos on TV and things as famous, right? So that was basically really how I went into the music industry by accident. So
So from that one I didn't know. So
Yeah.
from real estate, and then you
Yeah.
had the opportunity to go into the music
and
industry.
it was also one of my the loves of my when I was growing up, right? Oh, I love my music. I love my I love music because I love listening to music. But unfortunately, as I said, I'm not as talented any one of you in this room because you guys all play or do something more technical in music than I do. But I guess my career kind of went to the path of marketing, promotions, and A&R and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, super interesting.
Yeah, so that was by accident.
That's
So
how.
by
That's
accident.
that's
So
that's the
then
bias.
there was no turning back, right? So it was no turning back after that. So from Virgin, what do you call Virgin Records? Then I went on to run the domestic label for EMI, besides international, right? So there was a marketing promotions, marketing and promotions department for EMI. So then after that, short stint in Sony Music. Yeah.
Oh, so it was EMI first, and then short stint at Sony, and then
Yes.
back at EMI.
Yes, that's right. It was just that.
Okay.
So it was also very interesting that again, it's a bit more for us because we are chatting about this, right? When I left for Sony, Mrs. Bay wasn't very happy simply because I never told her I was going to leave for Sony, and she literally said, you know what? Why don't you just leave the company in 24 hours? I was like, oh my god. And I did, right? And I because I was leaving for a competitor.
Yeah.
So she literally asked me to leave in 24 hours. I was like, wow, But I guess it's something that again, in your career, these are things that you go through, right?
Yeah.
But fortunately enough, I had the option to come back to EMI also because Mrs. Bay said, you know what, I think you should come back. Because I'm retiring,
Okay.
and
Okay.
I want to, I want you to understudy me, and I feel that you have the potential to take on this role. So that's how my career got extended within EMI in my capacity as deputy MD and MD. Yeah.
When she invited you to be her understudy, does that mean like how long were you kind of following and
1 year.
1 year
Just 1
to
year.
understand what her role
Yeah,
is?
just 1 year. Yeah.
Okay.
So then she was taking a bigger role in Southeast Asia and things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were handling. She wanted you to take over domestic, and she was looking
No, she was literally asking
the whole thing.
It's basically EMI Malaysia. Yeah. So it was
How
a
old were
big
you
job.
at that time?
I was 32, I think. Yeah, I was
Okay,
32 at the
okay.
time. Yeah. So it was also a very challenging period because, again, if you look at it, when I took over, it was 1998, right? And it was during the financial crisis,
Yes.
the Asian financial
Yeah.
crisis, and it was really baptism by fire, because at that time, EMI used to have also a cassette factory, right? So a lot of you don't even know what a cassette is, right? If I give you a cassette, you probably don't know how to put the cassette into the cassette player. So there was those days that I had to literally close the cassette factory simply
You had
because
to.
it was
Okay.
and it was very difficult. And as a young MD at the time, it was so difficult because I had to talk to somebody who's been with the company for like maybe 30 years, or 20 years because they've been effective for that long, right?
Yeah.
So, but it was also, as I said, baptism by fire because it was a good chance for me to. It was character building for me, right? Whereby I have to manage people's emotions. I have to also think of other, whether there are other things that I can do for them so that their livelihood doesn't get disrupted, things like that. So I got them into other factories and things like that.
Okay. Wow.
But it was still tough,
Yeah,
and
of
also
course.
during the financial crisis, right? Business can be very tough. So it was that period that really is a character building period for me.
And that was the period you came in, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Oh my God, crazy.
Yeah. But it's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I think as I said, to me, it is great because I learned a lot, right? In a short period of time, in the fastest period of time. So
Interesting.
yeah. Then after that, after EMI, then that's when, interestingly enough, I was headhunted to run Adidas Malaysia in Singapore, and as I said, two of my loves in my, one,
sports and music.
sports, right? And I always laugh about this, and I tell my friends, you know what? The great thing about my career is that I always get paid for my hobbies.
Wow.
Yeah, so because I love sports, I get paid because to run the company, right? And likewise, music is the same thing, right? So that was what it is. So after Adidas, then the Formula One stint came about. Tony Fernandez came to me one day and said, because I knew Tony Fernandez during when he was in Warner, I was in EMI at the time.
Okay.
So we were intensely competitive, both of us.
Oh.
We were intensely competitive in the music industry, we were intensely competitive on the field, as in the football field, right? Because at that time, Rim had Rim games and things like that, inter-record company games, so we literally wanted to break each other's legs, right?
Oh my god.
Yeah, so literally like that. But, I guess sometimes, because of that, we respect each other a lot, right? So then he said, hey, Darren, you know what, I would like to start a Formula One team. I said, what, are you crazy? You know how expensive is it, is it to start a Formula One team? He said, yeah, I know, it's okay. I own planes, so I think I can afford that, and things like that. That was literally what he said, right? It's okay. Then I became, I think, employee number 4 or something like that.
Oh wow.
For his Formula One team, right? Of course, the unfortunate thing about Formula One is that it's a very expensive sport.
Yes.
It's a very expensive sport, and literally you spend about maybe 400 million ringgit a year just to maintain and run the team, right? So I left 1.5 years after that, and that's when I had a calling coming back to the music industry now. What was very interesting about my Warner stint was that I was talking to Kelvin Wong at the time, and he was president of Warner in South of Asia. One of those things why I kind of felt that why I left the industry, went to Adidas was also because at that period the industry was going through also quite a bit, right? Because there was a lot of piracy. There was it wasn't even digital piracy then. It was just basically physical piracy, right?
Okay.
And I thought, well, it's a very tough industry to be in. But I guess when I left, I said, hey, you know what? I think the music industry will evolve. It will evolve in some form, right? So that's when we have Napster.
Yeah.
You remember what Napster is, right? And Napster to me right now is really your Spotify.
Yeah.
A legal entity of Spotify.
Yeah, it
right?
became a legal.
Yeah. Why I came back to the industry at that time was I felt that I think the industry is going to go through this whole transformation called digital transformation. So I thought, okay, it would be a great challenge for me to not just sell CDs, because at that time it was still very much CDs driven, and to start getting into the more digitized and more transformative part of the industry. So that 11 years was really the whole transformation of the industry. Yeah.
During your time with Warner.
Yeah. And then it was really, that's when Spotify came in, YouTube came in, and all the streaming services started and things like that. Because right before that, it was really, remember, phones had ringtones. Right?
Yeah, it was the ringtone era.
Ringtones and stuff like that. So that was also that little period of transition, right, that the industry went through. So if you really look at it, the last 20, 30 years, the music industry changed a lot, right? So and it is what it is today. And this is also one of the most exciting periods of the music industry. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Okay. I want to go back to the time you were at EMI.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I read that when you were at EMI, you grew the market share from 16.5% to 21.4%. What happened there, like at EMI, that you grew the market share?
Yeah. Okay. I think the key thing also being in the record label is also really about understanding who your consumers are. Of course, hit records are actually very important, right? I believe at that time during the EMI days was one of the greatest successes that we actually had was that we obviously created a compilation called Mega Hit. Again, a lot of you may not even know this, but it's a compilation, right? Compilation market was a big thing in the music industry those days. Rather than you doing your own recording and putting your songs together, together with my team, it's like I think it was something that was driven by our Hong Kong office. Say, hey, why do we do this? So then we create this mega hit compilation. I mean, that one became huge. And also the key is also about identifying artists that are very that's actually suitable for the target audience, right? One of the artists that you all may know or may not know is Michael Learns Rock.
Yes.
Right? Now Michael Learns Rock was an artist that was only popular in Asia.
Yes.
So it kind of broke out of Indonesia because one of our colleagues was, hey, this song is really good, very melodic, very suitable for Malaysian market or the Asian market or Southeast Asian market.
Yeah.
And that's when we got together when we have our music conferences. We said, hey, yeah, it is actually quite cool, right? This music is so simple, it's so Malaysian, so melodic, so and I'm sure it's going to be great for karaoke, and that was basically what happened. And
So
that,
it was great for karaoke. That was the
yeah, it was something like that. Right? We were joking about that, right? It's like, oh, who are these guys? From Denmark. It's like, and they're not that great looking, and things like that. So sometimes it's not even about whether you look good or not. Sometimes it's just the music, right?
But the music would you could feel that the music would suit the market.
Exactly, exactly. So then you literally, went gangbusting on radio and TV and everything else, right? So and I think Microsoft keeps coming back to Malaysia every year, right?
Yeah.
For concerts. So quite amazing. Yeah.
Talking about that, so let's say, because I think this is an interesting look at the process. So, okay, you've decided that you have Michael Learns to Rock, and you want to kind of break it or introduce it to the market. What is the process like? Is it like getting in radio first, getting in media first? Like what's the general thought process?
I mean, at that time it's going to be very different from now.
Yeah,
right?
just
I
for
mean,
context.
at that time it's really about getting into radio, because where were the consumers consuming the music? It was through radio. I mean, it was literally just radio, right? And that was where we really had to put our effort on going to radio, right? But of course, is radio still relevant right now? Yes, they are, but not as significant as your digital streaming services, whereby you discover and stuff and things like that. So the world now, compared to the world, maybe 20 years ago, is so different. So those days were the basic stuff, foundational stuff. Go to radio, go to TV, get your video on, things like that. Put your videos, get your your songs or videos into shopping malls, wherever people sees it, right? So it's just a more conventional, not very creative way, but the basic stuff, right? Yeah.
So basically, trying to get as them to be so people can hear it as many places as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah. And at which point do you because I noticed around that time, because I grew up around that time, and then at some point they're gonna have like some either radio, like they'll be touring the artists. You bring labels will bring the artists in, but it wasn't a concert yet. It might be a showcase. It might be radio interviews, TV, like a promo trip. So could you just share at which point do you decide, this now is a good time to bring them for a promo trip, and what does that entail at that time?
If you I would like to also reflect back to then and now, right? Because promo trips those days were really those days when the industry was a bit more, I would say, the Western artists were a bit newer to this part of the world.
Okay.
Many a times for them they're like, I love to discover this part of the world, right? How big is this market here? Yeah, Southeast Asia is already 600 million people. It's huge. Asia itself is already quite a third of the world's population. So for them, they were also during this, let's say 90s, they were very curious about this part of the world. Okay. And I think the record labels were also very open to wanting to bring artists over, right? But of course, now it's very different. Now everything is about money. If I want to come for promo, it's going to be a paid promo, right? Those days was free promo in the sense that they'll come and they'll promote the songs. They go to radio, they could do interviews, they do press conferences, and maybe they do a short gig, they do a little let's say closed door event, or maybe things like that. Yeah. So those were the things that that happened, and the thing is that it's also, as I said, going back to us knowing the market. Yeah. When suddenly the song becomes number one on radio, it's like time to break them down, right? Yeah. At that time, those days was a lot easier to talk to the management, to the companies, and say, come down. These are justifications why you come down. Okay. Now it could be a lot more difficult, but it doesn't mean that we can't bring them down, right? Okay. But bring them down in the sense that, it could be paid in the sense that you have to find sponsors and things like that, to basically support the tour itself.
So when you said that time it wasn't paid, it means that because they would have the label from the home country where they're based, right? And then you have the label here. How does the finance work? Is it like, are you paying? Is the label here paying for it? Is it split? How does that work?
When it comes to promo trips, maybe there's something that is interesting to know, that it depends on how the financial arrangement is, or basically how the commercial arrangement is, right? Like a non-paid promo in this case would be, okay, they come down, we'll take care of everything locally. Okay. Sometimes we pay for their flights, right, from let's say Europe, right, and we'll pay for that. And they're here, we'll pay for all those. Okay. But it's just that they do not get paid like an artist appearance fees.
Okay, there's no artist appearance fees.
There's things like that. But nowadays it's slightly changed. So many times there are, so that there's per diems and stuff like that, you know.
Okay,
talking about,
so you have per diem, so like the payment per day.
Yeah.
Correct. And
So
then
those
also there's a payment for the whatever they're doing.
Yeah, and then and then there were also times where sometimes those days you can get sponsors and say, hey, you know what, this sponsor comes in, to support the tour. Those days they were not particular. Nowadays they're very particular. Anything that has a brand on it, they say, oh, you know what, I think I should get money out of it. So. So the commercial side of the business has also changed, right?
Okay.
Compared to those days. Yeah.
So the artist won't like, meaning as long as everything was arranged, it wasn't so particular as now. Now there's a brand and they want to cut.
And also because nowadays, a lot of artists are also endorsing brands, right?
Yeah.
They're also very particular. Let's just say if I'm going to be, let's say, endorsing Coca-Cola, they're going to make sure that, hey, you know what, you have a Pepsi, as a sponsor for Malaysian tour, for example, things like that. So, and they get lots and lots of money for endorsing certain brands.
Yes.
So that's also one part of the music industry that we should be looking at in terms of what sort of revenues can we generate beyond just releasing music, right?
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about
at some
that.
point.
Okay, so you were at EMI from 97 to 2004, then Warner was a different period, 2011 to 2022. So talking about that digital shift from, 98 was closing the cassette factory, and then you still had CDs, early 2000 CDs were still around, but then the digital shift, like what happened and what did you do to cope with that, with Napster and stuff? Because I remember, like when I was a student here in the early 2000s, burning a CD suddenly became like, almost, it was starting, but it's almost like people didn't buy CDs. People were just torrenting and they were just getting all this really badly named files from the internet for free.
True.
So how is that on the label side?
Okay, I think one of those problems that I would say record labels have, in general, globally even, was that I don't think they embraced technology fast enough. They were very much against it, right? In the sense that for whatever reason there is a very traditional mindset of record labels. They don't want to change as fast and as fast as they should be. But of course, of late, yes, they have, right?
Yeah.
And they start embracing even AI, right?
Yeah.
But when AI comes in, it's like, hey, you know what? I think we could do something against AI because they don't allow this, they don't allow that, right? So likewise, when the Napster days, the peer-to-peer file sharing, we call it, right? The record labels were very against it, and they fought tooth and nail to try to close them down, which they kind of succeeded because by making sure that a legal entity came out of it, which is the Spotify or the digital service provider of the biggest in the world. But then there are also lots of this all over the world. There's probably like maybe 800-900 DSPs in the world that we don't even know exist, right? So as I said, it was really very much a global shift to the fact that music became more as affordable to consumers. Right? Those days, buy a CD is like 30 ringgit, right? To buy a CD, 30 ringgit, how many CDs can you afford?
Yeah.
Now the great thing about now, with the digital world we live in, Spotify subscription is 20 ringgit, right? Or a family of 20, a family package of 20 ringgit, and it becomes so affordable.
Yeah.
There are 50 million songs in there, right? And because of the affordability, I think that's where the industry started to shift to say, hey, you know what? I think this is where the future is, right? And that itself was really a global thing, right? More than just a Malaysian thing or Africa, nothing to do with that. But it was very much. But for us, it's really about embracing that, right? So it was just that.
In Malaysia, because in US, obviously there was a very clear thing in the market where people were illegally downloading, and then that's when Apple came out with iTunes, where people were paying for downloads. And there was a period where paid downloads were a thing. Was that ever a thing here in this market?
Okay. You see, the great thing about the music industry now is that everything is on subscription mode, right? Those days we want to own stuff. We pay something, we own it. We put our CDs at home, right?
Correct.
And then Apple, iTunes came in and say, you know what? You can download a song and you can own it. But that one, happened, globally. But the acceptance of that is actually very, it's very low here.
Yeah.
The percentage, in the overall context, is probably single digit percentage of people wanting to own music,
Yeah.
right? By paying, like, I think at that time was probably 99 cents or something like that.
Yeah, I
per
remember
track.
because before Spotify came in, there was Wow, because I was on Wow Loud, just the brief period before
That's right.
Spotify. And it's like before that was for the indie side, it was Music Canteen.
Yeah.
And that was like 3 ringgit downloads per song.
Yes.
And I was always wondering what were the numbers of people actually paying
Yeah,
3 ringgit.
not many.
Not many, right?
Yeah, not many. Yeah. So that's why I say the great thing about the music industry now is that, or rather how people consume music, is that it becomes so affordable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think this generation wants to keep stuff. They just need to be on the cloud. They just need to subscribe, and that's it, right? There is no need for ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So hence the success of the DSPs.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Talking about like making money in music. When you were at EMI, I read that you partnered with 25 brands, cross promotions, activations, alliances.
Oh, okay.
You work with Coca-Cola, Canon, Nokia, so. On a record label side, when you're working with all these brands and then you have a roster of artists, how does that work in terms of with the artists, with basically your roster of artists, and how does that work for the label when you're doing a deal like that?
It is something that I would say is still very relevant in today's world of the existence of a record label, right? I believe brand partnerships are very key to a couple of things. One is really the profile of the artist, profile of the brands themselves, because brands want to look at collaborations, and that was something that we kind of identified very much earlier to say, hey, let's try working with these people, right? There wasn't a lot of money, but it is also really sometimes not about the money, but based on the commercial side of a record label is that, hey, you know what? Coca-Cola can reach so much because they've got so much, advertising, MMP, right? Or AMP, that's what you call it. Advertising promotional dollars, so they can reach a lot more audience. So it was really very much the thought of, if we can associate our artists with Coca-Cola, the
reach will be bigger.
Then the reach is bigger, and then it builds profile. Likewise, with the great thing about music industry is also musicians are very powerful. Powerful in the sense that they are great influence, right? And brands want to be associated with them. Right, so you see so much endorsements, it's all brands related. So it's also because of the so-called partnership that you want to leverage. It is relevant now. It is relevant, in those days. Okay. So it was just that.
At that time, let's say you approach Coca-Cola or you approach Nokia. Was it the case that you approach them or the brands approach the labels at that time, or is it a mix of both?
Okay. Actually, it's a mix of both, right? At that time, I believe a lot of brands were also looking at, for example, Pepsi did something with Michael Jackson globally, right? I was like, wow, that's ultimate of endorsements. So a lot of brands, whether it's the Coca-Cola or whether it's some local brands, they want to do something like this. So whether it's a scaled down version or full-scale version, it depends what it is. But from a mechanic standpoint, it is very much about let's work together. Let's just bring this brand to a different level, to the different audience. Because Coca-Cola would say, oh, you know what, great, I've actually got, let's say an artist's so-called audience that's another 100 million, let's say 100,000, for example. Hey, I get another 100,000 fans who knows about the brand and things like that. So it is actually very much that. But of course, it's also, matching artists to the brands. Certain things, certain brands gets personified well with certain artists. So you want to also be able to do that. So now in the context of today's world of record labels, there are with certain divisions or departments within organizations that does that, the brand partnerships, sponsorships, events and things like that. So because a lot of people think that record labels are just getting artists music out to the world, right? It's not just that anymore, right? So I think there was one question that was asked about the difference between US labels or UK labels, or let's say Western labels versus Malaysian labels. The good thing about in Asia is that we do actually try to manage the artists at 360. We call it 360. It means literally we handle the artist's so-called commercial part of the business. At a 360, literally 360 degrees, whereby it's not just about recording, getting the songs out there, promoting, marketing, but also they handle the management, right? In terms of doing endorsements, doing let's say events, doing. Right now, a lot of artists will even have to monetize their social media, for example.
Yeah.
So that's part and parcel of what we actually do in Asia, right? Whereas in America, it's a bit more distinctive, whereby when they tour, they have a different tour manager, tour entity. The artist will say, okay, if I'm going to work with a label, it's purely just for recording and getting my songs out there, right?
Okay.
But anything to do with merchandising, don't touch it. Anything to do with touring, don't touch it, and things like that. So Asia is slightly different from the West. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember because growing up, right, I remember going for like a KRU concert at Sungei Plaza, and I remember my memory of it as a teenager was KRU was selling socks. So I mean, like when an artist like that, KRU is now they're back, but big concert. But so was that initiated by the label? Were you involved at that period of
no,
time?
I wasn't, because I don't think I was with KRU at the later part of their career.
Okay,
It was at the very beginning of the career.
Yeah, that was a
Where,
very
in fact, together with my other good friend at that time, we discovered KRU.
Oh, really?
Literally, it was a funny story, right? Because they were, it was in Patama complex. There's one particular what do you call record shop that does taping of recording of songs, right?
Okay.
So they, you go there with a blank tape, blank cassette, and say, oh, I want these 10 songs, and that's what it is. So that's where we actually discovered KRU there, because they were doing some stuff there, and then somebody said, hey, you know what? Check out these boys, and it was just that, right? And we listened to it. It was a rap song that they did for the Selangor Football Club.
Oh, really?
Right? Yeah,
Wow.
it was that. And then Calvin and myself, we were like, oh God, this is great, man. That was it. Then we approached them, we signed them to EMI at the time. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
so this is what led to Changgela, the first album.
the very first one. Before
my
they
God.
yeah.
Okay.
So discovery of artists those days and now is so different too, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about a record label, how do you discover artists? It's like, oh, you know what? You got to go to the gigs. You got to see where they're performing, and maybe it was through you get tapes and CDs and demos and stuff like that. But nowadays, the great thing about the discovery of artists is that, especially during the COVID period, there's so many new talents that came about because everyone was at home creating music. And for us, at one point, we're like, oh, you know what? I guess the A&R guys can just sit at home, in front of their laptop, and in front of the PC, in front of the phone, to discover artists.
So that's what happened during COVID, like in terms of the A&R people?
Yeah, and the emergence of the number of talents that actually emerged out of that period was crazy, right? It was just crazy, right? That's why at some point a lot of artists started signing a lot more acts simply because it was just literally
so many
the
talents.
floodgates were open for talents, and there were those who were really trained, those who were not trained, right? So you also have technically musically inclined talents that emerge, but you also have those people who are basically just social media artists, right? So I think at some point we'll talk about, well, would a record label sign a social, Insta famous artist, or has it got to be a Berkeley graduate artist? I think that's something that we can talk about at some point.
I think we should, this relates to a question that I got. One of the students was asking.
Yeah.
So one of the students asked, how can aspiring artists leverage Malaysia's current trends and diversity, meaning just like the things that make us Malaysian, to develop their own music? Was that something that you noticed, that your artist roster?
Yeah, you see, the thing is that we're also talking about the fact that Malaysian artists don't seem to be able to break internationally.
Yeah.
Why? Partly it could also be because of the expectations of, let's just say, local artists. Like, for example, if you're a lady, you're a girl, okay, like, you got to be a tudung, you got to dress properly, right? And sometimes if you look at it from the demands of the global market itself, it's not just about, to them, they just want music, they want entertainment, they want the whole package and stuff like that. There are certain restrictions to some of our artists going out there and say, if I'm going to be more revealing, guess what? My Malaysian, fans will not like it. And there's so there's always going to be that battle of like, who should I be, right? Of course, we also have a lot of artists who are more daring, who's like, oh, I don't care, right? I'm just going to go out there and try to break the international market. So there are artists like that too, right? So,
I think-
in the context of, let's say, but if you look at Malaysian music itself, it's very rich in terms of its heritage, right? But of course, its language going to be something that will be interesting for people to say, should I sing in Malay and try to break internationally, or do I sing in English to break internationally, or do I sing another language to break internationally, right? So these are things that I don't think any one of us have really got a formula to say, let's just do English, you will break. No, it won't happen, right? Of course, we have the ZRVs and the UNAS of the world that has actually done that, to a certain extent, with some success in the US, right? But it will all, that's why if we look at domestic artists that continues doing it in Malay, then the other place that we can get into is Indonesia, Singapore, Brunei, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't really go very far. But the interesting thing also about Malaysian artists is that we also have the Chinese artists that have actually made it big in China,
Very big,
right?
yeah.
Because of, again, the language, right?
Yeah.
So, but will we be able to do stuff that marries all the different languages? Possibly. So we can obviously be more experimental, more daring. Music is also really about us being more daring. We have to take risks. But the failure rate is also very high. I mean, if because this is a session about record labels, I can tell you the success rate of record labels not very high in terms of breaking acts. We may release 10 artists, but probably 2 will make it. The other 8 may not make it.
Okay.
You see, that's the very brutal statement about being in the music industry, right? But the good thing about the music industry is such that it is a huge ecosystem of many things that you can do. If you don't end up being a musician, you can be an arranger. If you can't be an arranger, you can be a producer. If you can't be a producer, you can be a video producer. You can do a lot of other things. Or at the end, you can even own your own music label. Own your own publishing company. So there are lots and lots of things that a student like you or any musician wants to get into music. There are many other things that you can do within the ecosystem itself.
Very true. This is great because we're going to go into more questions about artists and stuff. Just looking at your experience and looking at Malaysia now, are there any systems or policies or things that are helpful for independent artists to thrive in Malaysia? Are there gaps in what exists in the ecosystem or the platforms here?
Yeah.
What do you think?
You see, it's always very challenging for independent artists. Simply because independent artists will tend to have a certain genre of music that is very uniquely theirs, right? Second thing is it's also about the financial hustle.
Yeah.
So one of those things that I've always, just like for those who attended Dr. Izam's session, you probably know that during my days in EMI, we bought EMI at that time bought Positive Tone.
Yeah.
I think he mentioned that,
he
right?
mentioned that. Yeah.
And that was also the conversation where I spoke to him about the fact that he was very against working with major record labels because the indie artists and indies tend to have that misconception, or at least the perception of record labels, the majors are here to gobble us alive, and it's don't give us the creative independence and everything else, right? So that was where my relationship with him was started, whereby I said, why don't we do this, right? I'll give you my commercial input, then ultimately you can give me your creative input, right? Let's put those two together and see whether it works or not, right? And I think that's how our relationship flourished, whereby I was the commercial guy who says, creatively really good, commercially will not sell, right? and being a creative guy, to him it's like everything I create is going to sell, right? That's how it's going to be, right?
Okay.
So it's really very much about the indies versus the majors. So even up to now, I think a lot of indies, independent artists are still very resistant to working with major record label.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be an advantage of working with a record label in a very different context. Now, when let's say if you are an independent artist, you go to a record label and say, you're a major record label, can you help me, right? So there are certain labels that will say, yes, we can help you. What are the areas you want us to help you with? Recording, international connections, international writers, or marketing support, or this and that and that. So there are lots and lots of stuff that major record labels have. They're equipped with that. They have a massive amount of network that they can actually help you with, right? So that's where I've always encouraged independent artists to work with us. Even right before I left Warner itself, one of those artists that was really resistant to record labels was Master.
Oh yeah.
Right, Biara Master, right? I said, tak boleh lah, jangan, the record company will out to cheat us and stuff like that. It may be also because what had happened is that when the music industry was at the, let's just say you go back to 20, 30 years, some record labels were not highly ethical to begin with.
Okay.
But of course, the good thing also with the introduction of more major record labels coming into the industry, Warner came in the 70s, EMI came in the 60s, and then Universal came in much later. And it also created a lot more professionalism. There's also a lot more ethics that was actually in the industry, because those days you can have contract which is one pager and says, oh, you're signed to me and this is how much I'm going to pay you, right? And then when it comes to conflicts, that's it. How are you going to fight on a one-page contract, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So those sort of things. So maybe a lot of independent artists were burnt because of that. It's like, oh, tak boleh lah, kena tipu lah, things like that. So that's where they will say no. But right now, the industry is a lot more mature, a lot more professional, a lot more transparent. That's why, and we also have associations like Irene and things like that comes into to make sure of us protecting not just the artists, but literally not just the artists within the record labels, but also the independents itself, right? So if you really look at it, from a government standpoint, I'm sure there are lots and lots of other support. My creative comes in to help support. Right now, I still think that there's still not enough to be done by the industry, or rather by the government to support the music industry. But I hope that can change at some point. But
So
it's got lots and lots of lobby that has to happen.
I'm just gonna ask on behalf of artists here, because I'm sure there are artists here that are wondering, should they still make the idea of I should work with a record label, I should try to get signed, and then the question is, with our climate right now, with people getting famous on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, when would be a good time for an artist to actually, if a label doesn't approach them, when is a good time for them to approach a label, and in what circumstances would they have more leverage, I guess?
Yeah, those days, let's say artists that were signed to labels, they were very dependent on record labels, right? I said, oh, you know what? I'm going to have I have to promote you, I have to market you, advertising you, and I could advertise your music and stuff like that. But the great thing now is that I'll always say, in this generation of artists, is that make sure you have your socials ready. Make sure you are out there, because see, in the olden days, I literally would say olden days because 20 years ago to me is really old, right? It's really ancient, right? Whereby either you hear yourself, you hear your music on radio, or you hear yourself, you see your music video on TV. That's it. But now, the power of social media is in your own hands, right? And if all of you, one of those things that I've always encouraged the new generation of artists to do is to make sure you're active on your social media, right? Whether whether you create content, whether you're posting stuff about your music, about your life and stuff like that, be out there, because because we live in a very digital space, a lot of these things are being discovered that way, right? And if you are able to do that, you can create your profile that way. So that, like I said, during the COVID period, a lot of artists were discovered because of that. We could not go out there to somebody's session to see how they're performing. We cannot audition anyone, right? But it was through social media that we're able to do that. So now, when does it, is there a time that you go to the label or radio comes to you? It's really both ways. If a label is very active, during my Warner days, we were very active in terms of creating, or rather supporting domestic artists. We always feel that Malaysian music is going to be, it's our national heritage. How we promoted Piramli. Piramli was the EMI, right? Like the Salomas and things like that. That's our national heritage. And now, the current breed could also be the heritage for the future. You never know, right? Yeah. And I think what's also very important is to make sure that it is whether or not a record label is also supportive of signing lots of domestic acts. Now, this brings me to a point of commercialism, right? It's really record labels are in the business of making money. As horrible as it sounds, it is what it is. But there's also another part, there's a heart in the record label where we want to also make sure that we're able to also, keep the heritage of our music, but yet be able to make money out of it, right? Also depends. And some record labels will say, let's just do international repertoire, forget about domestic artists. Because you know what? Domestic artists takes a lot of more money to invest. If I can actually bring an Ed Sheeran song or a Bruno Mars song to promote it, it's a lot cheaper. I don't have to pay for recordings, right? Done by the US. For me, it's just really advertising promotions dollars. Whereas to do to work on a domestic artist, you need to spend so much money. You need to record them, you need to doll them up, you got to make sure you train them, you got to do this, do that. That's a lot of money. So there are lots and lots of labels who say, let's forget about domestic because not lucrative. Let's just focus international. But there are labels like to a certain extent. I went through the fight of like I need to still make sure that I have international repertoire, Chinese repertoire. I also have the domestic repertoire to be able to be in this to be in the industry itself. Yeah.
Talking about signing people like during the Wonder days, right? And so how do record deals work around that time? Like talking about COVID, like is it like in the past? People will talk about there's a big advance and stuff like that. What are the like? I mean, this is very generalized, but how are the terms?
Yeah. Okay.
How much like if someone gets signed, what do you usually get? Do they get an advance? What are the expectations? What's the how long is the contract?
Yeah.
I know this is a very big topic, but
it is. Literally you can. There are many ways of skinning the cat, right?
Yeah.
Horrible to use the cat to skin the
poor
cat, but I'm sure a poor cat. I'm sorry to use that analogy, but it is the only one that I know.
Yeah.
But record labels are such that record deals in that sense. Literally, it can be anything, right? Now, very much depends on how much you want to sign artists from the record label side, and sometimes from the artist side, how much do you want to be signed to the label? Now, if I'm desperate, I'm a new artist, I say, you know what? I just want to be signed. Never mind, you pay 3% royalties, I'm okay to accept it. Hey, it's a willing seller, willing buyer. But there are times where if an artist, if a label were to look at a superstar and say, I'm going to go after this superstar, another label is going after this superstar, that's when the price war happens, right? But then the artist comes into the picture and say, okay, do I pick between record label A or record label B? So that's where that's why artists sometimes will have the managers because some artists or some talents in this case will understand how to assess that. Some do not know how to assess it, right? It's like what makes a good deal versus what makes a bad deal, right? Now, unfortunately, some labels will be more exploitive. Some labels are a bit more collaborative, right? To say, never mind, let's look at this way. So, I think it is very much the commercial discussion that goes on. Advances or no advances. The days of big advances have gone. So labels don't want to give big advances, but they will commit maybe their spend on other aspects to grow your organization. So very much depends on the labels. Right? Some labels will say, I'll just sign you because I want market share, right? I don't care about making money. So that's where the commercial side comes into play. But there are some who's like, I think these artists have got a long career that's going to be able to make money for the company. That could be the aspects of why they want to sign certain artists. So really, it's very difficult to say a particular reason why a label, what do you call an artist signs a deal is done, right? So, yeah.
So like, when an artist gets signed, right? I remember you said just now that for some artists that okay you believe in the artist and you're gonna try to release 4 singles or something like that.
Yeah.
And how much of that is like you deciding, the artist deciding, the team deciding, or data deciding? Like how does that work?
So the digital world we are in now, right? Data do actually I would say we are very dependent on data, right? Now, those days, I will always say those days versus now, right? Those days is like, okay, you know what? I'm going to sell 10,000 CDs or 100,000 CDs. That's basically how popular I am, right? Now, I do not know who buys my 10,000 CDs. I do not know who buys 100,000 CDs. Correct. The amazing thing about the world we live in now is that we know exactly who streams our music. right? So now I know who is my target audience, I know how old they are, I know exactly where they reside, which area, and things like that, and the demographics of that. So because data is going to be very important for anybody from an artist standpoint. Just like when you as an artist, you have your own social media, you have your dashboard, you know exactly who's following you, right? And from there, you can actually basically create stuff for your audience. Likewise for artists, likewise for record labels, we know exactly who they are, and we know what sort of music they like, and there you go. We create those sort of stuff, for them. Okay? So that's the power of data right now, that we should always use.
I guess in terms of like people who are creative, right? There's always the struggle about, okay, like you said, you and Izam, right?
Yeah.
Izam has the creative idea,
Yeah.
and then you are like trying to look at how feasible it is.
Yeah.
And like in terms of like signing artists now, because a lot of the people that get signed are from TikTok, they're already famous to some extent now.
Yeah.
Like, how much of it is like, okay, we're gonna go like super commercial, this one will hit because this will work because this person's a TikTok artist or something. At which point is like, okay, this is too much, just manufacturing something.
So the consumption of music or the popularity of certain music, has also many factors why a song is a hit. Sometimes it could be like lyrically, it touches my heart, right? Therefore, people gravitate to it. Sometimes it could be just the beat. Sometimes it could be just the artist themselves. Sometimes it could be the viral factor because somebody uses that song, right? Now, there are many reasons to how a song becomes a hit. Now, I guess your question is more like, scalability and sustainability, right? There are times you have the one-hit wonders, lots of one-hit wonders. It is also very dependent on the artists themselves. Some artists will be, the funny thing also, my experience with dealing with artists is that there are some artists who's like, I'm serious about my career and I'm going to put all my heart and soul into it. So there are artists like that. Some is like, you know what, I dah glamour dah, I dah popular dah, and that's it. So so there's also an egotistical part of certain talents that are signed.
Okay.
So it depends, right? And because of that, I tend to say it depends because it's so situational. When it comes to this, there's no, it's no one size fits all, right? Different artists have different, let's just say aspirations. Some will say, you know what, I'm a singer now, I'm going to be a singer-songwriter. Great, that's also the sort of artist that we're great to actually have because they can also, that's where, I can't answer to your earlier question about creative freedom, right? So like, my Izam and my dynamics. So I personally would always want to assign singer-songwriters simply because they kind of come prepared as a package, right? Rather than me creating an artist. So, if my A&R department is not big enough to be a creator, but also A&R people also has this limitation. If I'm going to be a rock producer, a rock A&R guy, I'm able to do great rock songs, but if suddenly a pop artist comes there, I may not be able to do that, right? So, of course, there are other ways of doing that. So we can work with external producers, external arrangers, and things like that. That's, part of what we do. But, as I said, for artists, there are times where very much depends on them, right? If the record label believes in them and say, I think you should be on a 5-year contract and be able to create 10 albums, that's what it is. That's a commitment, right? So sometimes, of course, we fail, sometimes we succeed. But it's also very much, it also depends on the artists themselves. Are they committed to want to do that, right? So that's something that, as the contract goes, things change. Unfortunately, there will be some that will see through everything, but there's some that will not, right? So it's also a very, record label and artist relationship is really a human relationship. It's really a relationship, right? And it is, you put it on contract, everything should go as smooth as it is, but many times it doesn't happen. So somebody sues somebody else. It happens, right? So sometimes because the record label does not promise, I might promise you on my contract, but I don't deliver. Likewise, if the artist says I'm committed to do 20 songs, but I end up doing 3, then that's where all these little fights happen. And it happens a lot in the music industry.
When these fights happen, right, do they tend to happen like do you guys have always go to court, or is there's a lot of discussion like just
Yeah.
at the meetings and stuff? Like, what
Most of the time
happens?
it doesn't go to court
Okay.
because it's too expensive for
Yeah,
every
that's what I
party,
thought.
and okay, it happens, but it doesn't happen that much to the extent that people talk about so much about it, right?
Yeah.
There were a few cases of certain artists and label fights and stuff like that, but good thing is in Malaysia we don't have a lot of those
Okay.
compared to overseas.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah, and many times it shouldn't go to court, and there's always going to be a mediator that tries to solve all those.
Okay.
Yeah.
And here, I mean, I know, like the biggest thing now was Taylor Swift, like she just acquired the rights to her,
Yeah.
her catalog, right?
Yeah.
So does that happen here when artists at some, I mean, obviously the record label owns the sound recording rights, right?
Yeah.
But are there artists here that actually buy the sound recording rights? Like,
Okay.
does that ever happen
Okay.
here?
Record labels will always say this: if I'm gonna actually sign to my label, I'm actually gonna, because I'm actually in a way investing in the recording.
Yeah.
I will own it, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it will
of
be
course.
contractually stated that way, right?
Yeah.
In most instances, record labels do not sell unless there's somebody who says, "I want to buy your whole catalog. I want to buy your record label."
Oh,
That's a very different thing
okay,
altogether.
buying the
right?
label lah.
Yeah, buying the label or buying second. Most record labels will not want to sell because it's an asset.
It's an
Likewise,
asset, right?
likewise, many of you, I'm sure, you guys are also writers, right? Those are all those are your assets. You make sure you keep them, right? And I would encourage you to continue building libraries of that. That is literally the most important thing for you. Bruce Springsteen or Bob Dylan recently sold their catalog for like 600 million or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that's basically money,
It's an asset,
right?
yeah.
It's an asset. So most record labels will not just give it up like that unless there's a buyer who comes with a crazy amount of money and say, I'll buy that, right? So
Okay.
yeah.
I think this is a good time. In case, does anyone have any questions related to this? I know this is like, we're just like having.
Yeah, we've got lots of things to
But-
talk about, right? It's like,
Yeah. Does anyone have, okay.
Yes,
Go
please.
to the mic. Please go to the
Yeah.
mic so we can hear you as well. Introduce yourself and then ask the question, please. Thank you.
Okay, so on.
It's on.
It's on. Okay.
Right, good afternoon. My name is Helmi, Dr. Helmi, and I'm from IPSAS from UPM. Actually, I met Mr. Darren Choy quite sometimes because of I was like wonder about his energy. Because of before this, I'm a fan of Ella. So whenever Ella has a gig, small or big, whatever, I don't know. Even though at that time, when I checked the inlay in the cassettes, it's like A&R is ours me. But Mr. Darren always there, and then I was like, I was wondering like the relationship between what we call it, Mr. Darren with Rock Queen Ella, because of, you're always there. Even like the last concert I met you also, right, in the Axiata Arena. So sometimes I wonder, like, is it like the MD, managing director, will always go to their own artist concert, and then even sometimes when she did radio interview, I met him also because of we know about the days, and then it could be very difficult to meet Miss Darren, but in the meantime, he always following this artist, and that's one thing. And second is I want to know about budgets. For example, we always read from the newspaper and the magazines. Certain artists said that the record label always decide for whatever the material that they need to come out because they're not singer-songwriter. So how much actually the artist has to say. But since that you have mentioned about the 1998, I know Ella has collaborated with Michael Rock in her album Per Day. Then the issue was like among Asian is like she copied Michael Rock or Michael Rock copied her because of among the artists because of the song is Per Day. But in his album, in Michael Rock album, the title is Loss of a Friend. But the song is more popular among Asian. For that song. So at that time you were actually the MD, so I think you should answer this question. And then and in the meantime, because in 1998 we have financial crisis, and most of the artists cannot make it the album at that time, right? And she cuts the album, but unfortunately the album was like solely, and she's a co-producer of the album, but she didn't do well. Flop. The album was flop, and she has a hiatus for making a new album, which is that the Ilham Bichara was also under you. But at that time, she mentioned that the formula from the album is like her ideas, but not really well. But suddenly for that album, the album title is Ilham Bicara. The album boasts her name again, but she said that she didn't do much on like making decision. It's all the record label. So is that so how actually you give a say for like an artist which is that legendary status, but she has no music background, right?
Yeah.
So just want to know that how actually record label do this? They do have a certain budget or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Helmi. Thank you so much. Wow, 45 questions in one. I was like, okay, let me see. Okay. My relationship with Ella goes back to literally Ella 3010, right?
Yeah.
And it's a long relationship. So I do also still have a pretty good relationship with some of the artists. It is also maybe me personally being who I am. Like I like to build teams of players, as in this case, team members within my company. I do cherish my relationships with my artists, and I believe relationship is very crucial, very critical in terms of building trust, right? And when Ella started, in her career, of course she started actually interestingly in Warner, not EMI, right? And at that time, I was with EMI and I saw Ella in the Warner days. But it was very much about the fact that it is the relationship that's very crucial, whereby we will have to talk to each other, to understand each other, right? Ella, admittedly, as you said, she does not know anything about music except for the fact she can sing. It was also something that we sat down and say, so what sort of support do you need? What do you think are your weaknesses and what are things that you need, right? And from a label standpoint, we are like, okay, if we are able to do this, we'll do this for you. If we're able, we can't, okay, we'll try to figure out something else. But of course, we go into our fights and our squabbles, our arguments and stuff, right? Because at that time, she also had her manager, who's also very, very strong, right? ICOM at that time. So we go through those sort of, we fight, but we kiss and make up, we fight and kiss and make up, and kiss and, but that's where it strengthens the relationship. So why even up to now, I was also kind of involved with her. After leaving the music industry, I was also involved with the concert in Singapore, right? Her Judita Care, 2 nights in Singapore we sold out, which was amazing. So I would say the relationship is really very much about the trust and also the capability, right? Now, I can still have a good relationship, but if I'm not capable in delivering certain things, then she would not trust me. So I'm fortunate to say that myself, together with my team, I always want to credit my team for being able to do what we can do for her career, right? And because of that, that's where she said, whatever you do, I trust you. So I think the trust word is very important. I mean, it's in the context of this session, I know this word comes out, right? For her, she's very dependent on us simply because she knows her weaknesses. She doesn't know a lot of stuff that needs to break the song. How, and things like that. So that's where we came in. That's where we talked about earlier. It's the support system, it's the ecosystem, it's the network, it's the resources that we can come in and say, will help you bring you to a different level, right? And she was also very disciplined and very committed to wanting to do what she wants to do. And when we explain, you do this, potentially this is what it is. So for me, it's always about justifying, not necessarily justifying, but at least me presenting the case to her and say, this is basically the potential outcome, right? If you do this, is what it is. But of course, like all relationships, there are also, patches whereby, I could not even do what I promised to do. But I said, I'm so sorry, but I tried. So, it's also important for her to see that we put in the effort. We spent a lot of money on her album because we felt that it may not make a lot of money for us as the music company, as a record label, but it's great for our career. So, it is something that we feel that very much depends on the MD themselves, right? So the MDs will be like, let's just make this a transactional relationship. Okay, you do one song for me, I promote this. You do one song, I promote it. But for me, I felt that it's a lot more than that, right? So there's something that is why, to some extent, I'm kind of seen everywhere. But I don't think I do enough for her. A lot of credit has to go to her because she also is also very hardworking on her part. So that makes a great dynamics of music label or MD artist relationship. So yeah, so that's one. What other questions do you have?
About the budgets for one artist in one
Yeah,
year,
okay.
everything.
The budget for one artist, right? It varies between artists. Like for
Based
example,
on? Based
sorry,
on?
based
What
okay,
year?
based on the contract period that you have, based on the albums that you have, based on where I record the album. Let's say if I were to record an album overseas, the label, the record itself, the album itself would cost 100,000. Now with that, I would have invested, let's say 100,000 ringgit on the recording. Now, how much money do I have left to actually promote it locally? Now, of course, that's where the business part comes in, where I look at P&L and say, okay, if I were to put on advertising, promotions, I do touring, I do the makeup, and I do the concerts, it really is very difficult to say whether 1 million ringgit is enough to promote an artist or 100,000. Sometimes small little artists that breaks, you don't spend any money, but they break, right? So that's where we talk about, to a certain extent, social media artists, right? So we have the social media artists, we also have the talent, real musically trained talent artists, talented artists, right? So going back to the budget itself, as I said, I can't even put a number to say what it would be a number for an artist. Really cannot tell, yeah. Because even the spending of your investments will vary a lot, right? Do I spend more on digital, or do I spend more on traditional, or do I spend more on recording, do I spend more on music videos? Depends, right? Now, those days you can do a music video for 5,000 ringgit. Now you can't do a music video for at least, for at least 30,000 ringgit, things like that. Now. So the context is very different. Now, there are times record labels could say, I want to invest and make a brilliant video, have a brilliant single or brilliant album. They will invest a lot. So hoping that they will get high returns too. So that's where the finance team will sit down with the MD to work out a P&L and say, okay, I think let's go, right? But sometimes we lose money too, right? So unfortunately, okay. Any other lagi tak? Anything I miss? Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's pretty good.
Okay. But you can still continue talking to me after this. No worries.
Okay.
I'll be around.
Any of the students here from ICOM or anyone else here? Oh yes, you want to ask? Just go
Yes.
to the mic, please. And introduce yourself as well. Yeah, he knows which mic.
Hi, Mr. Darren. My name is Lucas. I'm a student from ICOM. So my question is more related to business side, right?
Right.
Wait, what's my question again? Yes, I remembered. As a managing director, I believe you have to make a lot of decisions where you need to know which kind of decisions you make to make sure the company run, and also make sure that the career is not on the line, because one single mistake can destroy the whole career, right? So I wanted to know what is the criteria that you looked at when you are making your decisions, when you are deciding on which is better, which is worse, which one to prioritize. What is the criteria that you looked at, and maybe how do you leverage your risk when you are making your decisions?
Right. Okay. Thanks, Lucas. I mean, making decisions as an MD, yes, what you say is very true, right? There's a lot of responsibility for me when I'm at the helm of the company. The unfortunate thing of being an MD sometimes is not about, you know what, I get to go to the office at 9 o'clock and leave at 9 o'clock with music blaring all the time, right? The reality is not that. As much as of course I still keep my music on all the time, but the reality is really me having to make the right decisions to make sure that I'm able to drive the business. Now, when it comes to the business, there are such a thing called budgets, there are such a thing called forecasts, there's such a thing called P&L, right? And my responsibility is really very much that. Now, what's our criteria? Now, it's to me, it's always about I always feel that data is very important for us to make the right decisions. So if I were to just pinpoint a criterion, it's really about the utilization of the right data. Now, to a certain extent, making decisions in the music industry is actually a combination of art and science. Why I say art and science is that there's also a gut feel that over the years, maybe I've actually developed the gut feel of saying, I think this is going to be a hit, or I think this is not going to be a hit, right? I've been wrong, I've been also right, to a certain extent. So as I said, the great thing about making decisions right now, as an MD, is really about using the right data, being able to analyze it, have the insights, and then to a certain extent, have a bit of gut feel to take that, to make that decision. It can be a risk, but it is what it is, right? And I don't deny the fact that I've made mistakes in my career as an MT. I've also, on the other hand, made some right decisions that was amazing, right? So yeah. So criteria-wise, as I said, it's really about insights and data. Yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah. Come on, Karen, please. Let's make this as interactive as you can.
What is your first move if you were to start a record label? What is the first move that you will make for a company?
Oh, I got to make sure I've got a lot of money.
I mean,
Yeah.
strategic-wise.
Strategy-wise, yeah. Okay. Now, I think it's interesting, right? Because I've always been running music labels for other people, right? Somebody asked me the same question. Would you not start your own label? I said, I've thought about that. And then, you went on to say, oh, what sort of artists would you sign, right? But I also know one thing, that, owning a label is not that easy. Finding the right artist is not that easy. So I would not actually run a label, but I would probably collaborate with a lot of people to create, a music label, right? Because I know I'm never going to be the one-man show. I'm going to need Lucas, I'm going to need Helmi, I'm going to need us, because each and every one of you would actually have your own strength to actually create a great music label, right? Because having a music label is not just having a music label, because there's so many other criteria you need to think about. The criteria could be the type of artist, the genre, where do you promote it, how do you promote it, how much money do you invest, and things like that. So of course I've gone through that, and I thought maybe it may be too much for me to be able to just do that on my own. So I would literally say, hey, you know what? I would just get together, the ICOMs of the world, ask someone of the world and things like that, and do that, right? So, if I were to really get into a music label, that would be something that I'll do. Yeah.
Really great answer. Talking about just like in terms of students, because we have all the students here, some of them are studying diploma in sound production, so they want to be engineers, they want to be producers. You have people who want to be arrangers, and some want to be artists. So, like, as a student entering the music industry, this is a question from one of the students. What's the kind of mindset and skills that you think are essential to survive or thrive in the music industry that you find that it's probably not usually taught in school? It's something that you learn in the trenches.
Yeah, I would say it's your character, right? Your character is going to be, that's the most important thing, right? If you have the tenacity, you have the perseverance, you have the patience, and that itself basically will be important. Whether you're going to be a sound engineer, you're going to producer, arranger, artist, or whatever, it's really about all these traits that you should possess. Now, of course, that's also the other thing about you looking at yourself and say, you know what, have I got what it takes now? Of course, it's about confidence too. You've got to be confident. Now, assuming if you're not there yet, then I still go back to the fact that, you know what, work with somebody else, right? Work with somebody to enhance what you're able to, because many times you cannot go at it alone, because everyone has got their own strength, and I always feel that the partnerships and collaboration is very important. Now, going back to what you said, you asked about is that as I said, I would just say the character is very important. Now, many times it's really tough in whatever that you do, but there are also the network that you want to actually build, right? Build a community, build a network, collaborate, be socially visible and things like that. Build a profile for yourself, because those things are very important. I feel, right? Because even if you're an arranger, it's like, you know what, I'm just an arranger, I'm always behind scene, nobody's gonna know me. But you know what, build yourself a profile so that people know who you are. An artist is easy because you're always in the front of the stage. What about the people behind, right? And many of you potentially will have a career that's behind the stage, not in front of the stage. Now, if you're not an artist, when you're behind the stage, guess what? You've got to still build yourself a reputation, build yourself a profile, build a portfolio of all your achievements, big or small, right? And rave about that, talk about that. Tell people you've done this, you've done that, right? So that's important. Likewise with artists, right? I would just use somebody like Faisal Tahir. When I first signed Faisal Tahir from Media Prima into Warner, one of those things he told me, oh Darren, you know what? I'll never go into TikTok. Never. I'll never create anything. I said, no, Faisal, listen to me, right? Why I think TikTok is very important. At that time, it was probably maybe 10 years ago when TikTok was at this infancy stage, right? And people were consuming TikTok because there were funny videos, people doing cartwheels and doing all kinds of stuff that's non-serious. But I say no, think about it as a platform, right? A platform for you to reach your audience. So that's when I say, why don't you just create everything to do with music? Because you are artistic, you are about your music, you are about your lyrics, about your singing and everything else. So okay, I chuba, I'll try. So and I think this is basically what happened. He created that just purely on music and nothing to do with funny cartwheel videos, right? And I think at some point he did say, oh, thank you for pushing me to do that. Now I see that, right? So I reckon that this is some of the things that we will advise artists to say, we see certain things that you don't see, hence we want to encourage you to do that, right? So going back to my point about building your profile, build it in all your socials. Some of you have I'm sure you have your Instagrams, you have your what do you call it, even your YouTube channels, or even some of you with your Chinese platform of Xiaohongshu. Do it, do it on every platform, right? Because you never know who can discover you when. Yeah, that's the thing. And because nowadays labels, I wouldn't say they're lazy, but it's just that because it's so easy to find you on social media, be found on social media. Yeah.
Talking about in terms of like making money in a label, right?
Yeah.
Like around the time when you were at Warner, right? Especially towards the end, where was the revenue coming from in terms of the artist roster? Is it coming from mostly from streaming, coming from licensing? Where was the income being generated in terms of that?
Within the P&L of the profit and loss of a company, most of it obviously will come from streaming.
Okay.
Then there's also the public performance royalties that we get from outside. And of course, there's also another element that comes from what you call events and sponsorships and things like that. So if you to look at it that way, it's as simple as that, right? Okay. It's basically monetization through streaming and things like that, public performance, and then events. Yeah.
Talking about signing artists, right? Because you've obviously worked with a lot of artists, so many artists over the years. What are the common misconceptions that an artist has when they sign? They think, oh, the label's going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and the label's going to do. What are the misconceptions usually?
I don't think it's actually more misconceptions. It's more so the arrangements, or rather the deals that you sign. Now, there are lots and lots of different deals that you sign with an artist. One is that I can sign a 360 deal, I can sign a licensing deal, I can sign a pure distribution deal. So what does that mean, right? Now, there isn't just one contract that you sign with a record label. The record label has so many different, it's probably like 20 different permutations of a contract. So that's also something that many of you will have to learn to actually, or at least understand about contracts, right? And I'm sure in the course there's probably something that you all need to look at. Going back to that point, I could actually do a deal with you and say, okay, you sign to me 360. That means I will actually handle every aspect of the monetization of your career. I'll sit down with you and say, okay, let's record this for 100,000. I'll promote you and I'll spend this much money and things like that. So there's a certain agreement on the contract. But there's also other deals like licensing deals or distribution deals. Now, distribution deals will be purely, you may have actually got a master recording that you come to me and say, hey Darren, can you just distribute for me? So I just basically get your stuff onto the streaming platforms. So it's purely just like that. I don't promote you, I don't spend money on you and things like that. So then the percentage of royalties that I pay to you would probably be higher simply because you own the recording, because you pay for it. Whereas if I were to sign you as an artist to Warner, then the royalties will be much lower simply because I'm going to be spending a lot of money. So it really depends on the deals that you want to do, right? So there are many ways of doing that. So, like even advances, right? You know, there is no record label can say, oh, you know what, every artist that comes here, I'll give an advance of 10,000. No, there's no such thing. It really depends on your negotiation and the demands of, you know, how long the contract is, how many singles you've got, how many albums you have, and things like that. Yeah.
So let's say you have an artist, and then I know this happens. I mean, I've read about it. You record an entire album or an EP or whatever, or singles, right? And then it gets shelved. Like when does that kind of thing happen, and why does that happen? Because you already spent money recording and maybe mixing, even mastering it, but it doesn't go out. Did that happen?
Not in my Warner days, but I know this sort of things happen for various reasons. Why it happened? Sometimes it could be just, you know what, there was falling out between the artist and the label.
Okay.
It's like, you know, the artist says, I don't want to promote anything. I don't like the album because you may have recorded it, but I don't like it. So then no cooperation, then you can't promote it, right? So there are a lot of those sort of reasons that, you know, things could. It could be a personal thing, right? That I don't like you, and because I don't like you, I'll just shelve you, right? It could be those sort of things, but generally it doesn't happen that much because there's an investment, right?
Yeah.
And you want, you know, from a record label standpoint, you want to monetize it.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, there are times that, you know, there were also situations I would say, okay, I take back what I just said about it. That never happened in my career, but there were times where an artist was not very cooperative, but I've already got a recording. I just went out to promote it, no matter what it is. But
so the artists didn't collaborate?
Yeah, they didn't collaborate in the promotions and marketing,
Okay.
but contractually, I still have the rights to promote it, right? Things like that. So it was literally independent of artists, like never mind. You know, and I guess the great thing about social media, I can still do a lot of things through social media without even art. Nowadays, even better, you might have AI that can literally, you know, do stuff for you, right? So anyway, you know. Yeah, that's another topic altogether, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, Irene.
I have a question.
Yes.
Because we are here training musicians, young musicians for the music industry.
Yeah.
So whether they are in the record labels or as artists or as producers, arrangers. I have a question. You mentioned earlier about Malaysian artists trying to break into the international market, and some, you know, are successful, whereas majority of them are not. Is there any work done by the label, either one label or a group, maybe Irene or someone can think about it, of how we can export the Malaysian music to international, since we are, you know, have experiences with multinational record labels, so we know the flavors, right? So is there any effort, or will there any effort, or will there be any effort to come up with some kind of a way, a platform, or an idea to put forward, like a Malaysian pop or something like that, out there, so that more new artists, like K-pop, you know, right? So that now they have an industry for South Korea, and now South Korea is in the international market. Now you've got them, you know, doing collabs with other artists to be more further known, right? But do we have something like this, or any efforts done by the record labels here, as opposed to just looking at individual artists? But do we have an idea of how to promote or to come up with a concept to get more people to be recognized world over?
Okay. Thanks, Irene. The K-pop phenomenon is actually quite unique in the sense to what the Korean industry did. It was literally the Korean government in, I believe, in the 90s, in the 70s or 80s, they said, let's just export the Korean culture, right? And because of that, the government, it was a government effort to went to the chaebols, they call it chaebols. Chaebols are basically the multinationals, the Samsungs of the world, the Daewoo's of the world. And they said, you know what, we have this agenda that we want to export everything Korean. Now, it was through electronics, it was through music, it was through, you know, food, it could be everything to do with the Korean. And that itself was a concerted effort by the Koreans themselves, as in the Korean government, that literally wanted to push Korea out there, and it is what it is today, right? And fantastic. But in the context of Malaysia, I don't think we have that. So if I were to just put Korea and Malaysia together, it's like, unfortunately, we don't have a government that wants to drive that. Now, having said that, the great thing also about the music industry right now is that it is actually borderless. Your music, once you're on Spotify, anywhere in the world, you know, your music is accessible. Now, of course, we could say, well, you know what, so it's available, so what, right? Now, that comes to a point of how much money or what can we do to actually get the music exposed. It's not easy, despite the fact that there are like probably 800 DSPs in the world, that once you upload the song onto a DSP, a digital service provider, in this case Spotify or the Apple Music, it is available in the world or for the world to listen to. Now, with that, there is the opportunity of the exposure. Now, as a music industry itself, I don't think, and I know that at RIM at some point, there were lots of push from RIM to the government to say, let's export Malaysian music. So at some point, there were a lot of effort that was put in by the industry for a lot of artists, because we managed to get some grants from the government to literally support artists that were going for festivals. Some in Thailand, some in Indonesia, and I think it's in Philippines too, right? But it kind of went to just to that level. So I don't reckon there was enough of how should I say, there isn't enough consistency and persistence in terms of us having that. So if we are we going to be dependent on the government? Well, yes and no. But will there be more lobbying that should happen? Yes, I would think so. At some point during my time in RIM, we actually created a paper to tell the government that the size of the music industry is worth about 1.2 million ringgit. It's just like exactly how we wanted to present the Taylor Swift Singapore experience to the government and say, you know what, the music industry, literally can drive the economy, right? Unfortunately, there are also some political reasons why the government, is not as open as Singapore, right? Censorship, religious mores and stuff like that. So a lot of these factors kind of comes in there and say, oh, you know what, the government's not going to be like. We presented a paper that says, literally, not just the music industry directly, but the supporting industries can benefit. The hotels, the Grab, the food, and everything else, right? So we literally presented that, and at some point the government was, oh wow, this is so big. Yes, we would support you, but it kind of fizzled out, unfortunately. Yeah. So I don't know whether I actually answered you. I wish there were more things that we could do as an industry to get our artists out there. But as I said, many times, sometimes if the government can't support us, we have to do it ourselves. I believe with ICOM, you've done a fantastic job in giving birth to all this, right? And that itself, it's also something that you can build on, and that maybe that's where your voice comes in too, right? To go to the government and knock on the doors and say, hey, you know what, look at this, right? So yeah.
Thanks.
Right, no problem.
Yes, please go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Hello, my name is Tiffany and I'm a music student. So the question I'm going to be asking about is like more music related.
Sure.
I would, because like as you mentioned before, you told an artist to be active on TikTok, right? Even though they were like doing like cartwheels everywhere, you still told him to do like music stuff. So I want to ask you, what kind of trends or like music genres do you see potential in, and you want like future artists to like explore more into?
Yeah.
That's my
Thanks,
question. Thank
Tiffany.
you.
Yeah. If you are an artist, of course you have your genre that you are comfortable with. That's basically what you do and things like that. Continue doing that. But I always say this also to my artists, that you should always also embrace and also be exposed to what's out there, right? There are times where, for example, an artist like Linkin Park, right? I mean, it's a bit old, but anyway, Linkin Park is one of those artists there. They actually play rock, but they also have a DJ in Mike Shinoda, right? And you think about it, that's also an evolution of a genre that was never created, but they created that, right? And as a musician, what you really should be doing is that continue to, there's a core of your genre, but be creative in terms of embedding stuff. Embed stuff that's from the 80s, for example. You sample something from the 80s. Maybe you can also create your own genre of music. So these are things that you should always experiment because you never know, right? You could be a trendsetter to a new genre of music that nobody's ever heard of, right? So it's always about being experimental too, because it will not hurt you, but the fact that you can still do it at home, so what if 15 people likes it, but then for all you know, when you continue creating something, suddenly you might have 1.5 million views of something, right? So when you have time, continue to be creative, and of course you want to also understand what's happening in the world, right? What's the music? What's the new type of genre of music? Like for example, maybe the last 1 year, Afrobeats was very big. So would you want to do pop with an Afrobeat in there, right? So people like an artist like Alif is very good. He listens to a lot of music that's current, and he incorporates that into his music, but he also evolves into something different. Then people can't say, oh, this is a sort of genre like you're copying somebody else. You're not, you're improvising, right? So that's also very crucial. Yeah, sometimes some artists will just copy something and say, this is, I want to sound like a K-pop artist. No, you shouldn't, right? You should be uniquely you by being different. Yeah.
I have
Yes,
a
please.
few questions actually.
Sure, go ahead, please.
I'll just get a mic.
Going to be as many as Helmi, sir.
Or maybe not as much. But
Sorry, Helmi, I agent you scared? Okay.
so it's something similar. I need to introduce her. My name is Mia. I just graduated from ICOM.
Congratulations.
Thank you. A bit lost, but anyway.
It's okay. We'll get you back to the path, don't worry.
Yeah.
I'll give you a compass.
Please. So it's something similar to what Tiffany asked.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask, should you do what you love, or actually should I pursue what I love, or focus on what the Malaysian market currently demands if my goal is to gain local fame and eventually break through internationally?
Yeah, okay. Very good question. Now, what is your passion?
Me?
Yeah.
The genre? Or
Yeah, your genre and what do you want to achieve?
I love J-pop
J-pop,
and classical music and
Okay.
opera and theory. It's very, and also pop,
Yeah,
but
okay.
it's not very
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll try to answer that. Now, I guess it depends on what you want, right? You want fame or you want fortune? Which one? There's a difference here. Fortune means I'm going to make a lot of money. I don't care whether I like what I'm doing, but I'll do it for the fans to make lots of money. If you want fame, it could be just like, I just do a genre that only 2 people listen to. That's fame to you, right? But you will not get a lot of money. So which one do you want?
Wow, of course, fortune first.
Okay, so then you just answer yourself, right? So if fortune first, then do stuff that the consumers want, right? But you can obviously infuse what you're passionate and what you're good at. So that's also something that why I just kind of mentioned to Tiffany, right? It's also about that. You don't, as I said, there'll be lots and lots of fans who's going to buy your music, who's going to listen to you and stream your music, right? Continue create, continue fulfilling their needs. Then at the same time, once you're rich enough, experiment with something else. Then you start creating your own niche. That's where your J-pop comes in. That's where your classical comes in. And say, hey, why not? Can I marry J-pop and classical? Yes, of course. Like those days, there's one artist called Vanessa May who plays violin, right? Classically trained. But what she did was, she did something that's so cool that everybody can dance to, right? So that's where you talk about evolution and also basically pivoting from exactly what a fixed genre should be. So you could actually try to do that, right? Yeah. Would you want to do that?
I'm already doing it,
Good, very good.
but
There
I
you go.
didn't publish it.
Yeah, you haven't published it. Yeah, so get it published. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
I
okay.
have more.
Okay. No problem, please. Go ahead.
So I would like to ask, are record labels in Malaysia more likely to sign artists who fit the mainstream vocal market, or are they open to more unorthodox, non-traditional styles that aren't necessarily tailored to Malaysian tastes?
Okay. It will depend on the artist. It will depend on the record label and its philosophy, right? Like, okay, if I were to use my former Warner position itself, I love to actually find and discover new artists, but I know it's also very risky, right? But when it's successful, I guess the whole exhilaration level goes up a lot more, right? And also, from a dollars and cent, the cashier tills rings more, right? But I guess to answer to you, certain labels have got different philosophies. They might look at you and say, you know what, I think Mia is interesting enough. I could develop her to do what it is. But on the other hand, Mia is too niche. I will not sign her. So there can be those sort of situations. So some will take a more commercial decision. Some will take a less commercial decision. Some will take a more artistic decision to say, let's gamble on something that that is not available in the market. But some will be risk adverse and say, no. I just want to do something. Somebody who comes in with a pop, pretty face, okay lah. I think that's guaranteed. So you got to also know the record labels. You got to study it. As much as the record labels wants to study and find out about you, you want to find out about them too. What's the philosophy? What does their A&R what's their A&R direction or let's say philosophy is, right? So some, like what you said, could be they sign you just to make money. Some they want to sign you to say, I want to make sure that your creativity is being nurtured. So it depends. Yeah.
That makes sense. I have
Okay.
last question.
Sure, no problem.
Then I'll give it back to us.
No problem.
So this is something you mentioned earlier, but you say you'll wait for another time. But I would like to ask now though.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
Because there's still a lot more. You got 15 other pages.
Oh wow. Okay. Last one.
No, just kidding.
So the record labels tend to prioritize signing Berkeley grads or artists who are already popular on social media, like
Yeah.
TikTok. Or
Okay. I think the first point is not true. It's not true. Record labels would sign artists that they feel that has a lot of potential. In fact, I never have ever come across me wanting to sign artists by saying, can I see where they graduated from? Never, right? Of course, if they graduate from ICOM, then I give them a bit more preference stuff. Okay? So normally it's like that. So, but no, it is really about the talent. It's also really about the belief, the art, the label, believing in whether or not that's the right artist that they want to sign. Right? So and then on your question about let's say whether they're social media famous or not, right? I would say that some labels would do it because they want to just basically, it's a flash in the pan, cash in on that, hit and run, make a lot of money now, and okay, bye bye, right? But some would say, hey, on the other hand, you may be social media famous. You can make a lot of money, but you potentially have a career that we can create out of you. Like for example, I don't know whether you know Lokman Podolski. Lokman Podolski is a YouTuber that we found during COVID, and I said, you know what, this guy is very good. And he was famous because of YouTube. Now, without YouTube, he's nobody. But we also felt that because eventually when we sat down with Lokman Podolski and said, Lokman, what else can you do? Then he said, I can write, I can rap, I can da. He said, okay, good. And we were also very confident of what he's capable of doing. Hence, he has a career that he came out of just being social media famous, right? So he could have said, that's it, I'm done really. Only one particular piece of content I did became 10 million views, and that's it, right? So it really depends, I would say, yeah. Some social media famous or discovered artists do actually have careers, long careers, Some may not, some will be a one-hit wonder, unfortunately.
understandable. It's like just a viral sensation for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Instead of a sustainable long.
Yes, yes. So you see, as I said, on that aspect also depends on the what they call the label, right? If I really believe in the artist, I want to make it sustainable, then I will invest to make it sustainable, right? But it also depends on the artists themselves to say, do I want that? Because some of them, let's say Elizabeth Tan, right? When I signed Elizabeth Tan, it was like, oh, it's all about singing. But halfway through her career, she said, Darren, really, I don't enjoy singing now because I get stage fright, I'm so afraid, and what do you like to do? But I'm happy to be in front of camera to act. And that's when she pivoted to become an actress and not being, so her career now is like, I act more than I sing, because that's where she found her calling, right? I want to be an actress rather than a singer. So, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I'll
Mia.
pass the mic.
No problem, thank you.
Yeah, talking about signing people, right?
Yeah.
Are there, because I mean, artists, creative people can be volatile, can be like, can be a bit crazy sometimes.
Yes,
Like, are there certain traits that when you see, maybe someone recommended you an artist, maybe they tell you, oh, this person is big on YouTube or TikTok,
Yeah,
but then when you meet them, are there like red flags or traits that make you hesitant to sign an artist?
Yeah.
Or, a bit cautious, like in the past?
Okay. I
How does it
will
go?
answer, I won't answer directly as per that, but I will answer something that I think is also very important. I came across a lot of artists from social media, more like Mia, you were saying social media famous, right? And because it was the COVID, I said, oh, this was interesting, that was interesting, okay. But when I met them, they were not like who they were on social media. So guess what? That's a red flag. To a certain extent, right? I was like, you know what? The person has no personality in person, but has a great personality on social media. Now, some record labels will say, don't care, just sign them, put them on social media and don't let them meet anybody else. Which can happen too, right?
Yes.
And yeah, so they suddenly become a virtual artist rather than a real artist, right? And that's also real. That's also real. And because the record label say, it's okay, just make money that way, right?
Yeah.
So that's what it is. So it is, the personality is also very important. Now eventually, of course, you can train certain artists. You can train them. You can actually make them media friendly and able to talk, able to present. But not everyone can, right? So there are times where they will come as who they are. That's when we say yes or no sometimes. So I have made decisions say I don't think the personality can go very far, even though I train, because it's a personality thing, right? So yeah. So not really red flag, but just indicators. I would say. Yeah.
And
I mean, like red flags could be like, you know what? I just realized that this guy is always on drugs. He's high all the time. Those are red flags, right?
Okay.
There were also artists that I've come across that were also, unfortunately, has taken that path, right? So.
And let's say, I mean, there's some artists, right? They become very famous, but they also are on drugs, or like they're like, they have very, kind of volatile or like dangerous lifestyles. At which point does the label say, okay, maybe we shouldn't like keep this artist or like try to save the artist or bail the artist?
Okay, those decisions very easy to make, right? If they're involved in all these things, we'll say no, bye-bye, right?
Okay.
And I think internationally also you have seen, right? Even for you to make a silly statement, so you can be ejected from the record label. So it's also an ethical thing, and so it's a moral thing too. And I'm also, unfortunately, I've also been to police stations to bail out certain artists who got into trouble. It has happened, but yeah, I believe it still happens, but it's probably less prevalent for the matter. Yeah, so our decision sometimes can be very simple, right? If that's what it is, if you cannot get out of it, I'm sorry. Because I can never get you to promote stuff. I can never get you on time. I have to wake you up all the time, right? That's not going to happen, right? So because we have all those, so it comes to being an artist, being an arranger, being a music talent itself. Discipline is very important. Your reputation and being disciplined is so important, right? And in my career, I've also dealt with so many artists who are so indisciplined. Not just indisciplined in terms of anything else, but also even in terms of money management, financial management, right? And this is something that I always encourage artists. You know, because there's so many artists that comes to me and say, "Oh yeah, can I be advanced?" Right? It's that sort of situation, right? So it's the whole, hulu tangan mentality that happens a lot, right? And I also, in a way, I would say I teach, but I try to help them also in terms of managing the financials, because a lot of artists may not make as much money as we all think they should, but it's also about managing that. That's also very crucial. Yeah. So as a record label, we don't just record you, we don't just promote you, but we also try to teach you the aspects of, hey, jangan your finance is for rainy days, right? Don't spend what you have tomorrow, but save, right? So things like that.
Yeah, in terms of those kind of things, like you have to have media training for the artists so they know what to speak during interviews. There's touring, there's social media. Which aspects of the artist's responsibility where the label is more hands off? It's not so much like you mentioned all the things that are hands on, guiding the artist. Yeah. But which parts? Okay, record label. This is not our thing.
What's on your contract basically tells you exactly what you are supposed to do, not supposed to do, right?
Okay.
But of course, if I were to look at the well-being or the package of an artist, I want to make sure the artist is perfect. I want to make sure you have media training, even though it is not stated in the contract that I have to do media training for you and things like that, or being in front of handling crisis and whatever else, right? So I've always said that I would love to make sure I get the best out of the artist, as long as you want to reciprocate and you come with open arms, right? Because not all artists are as open to what I say and what I want to do for them. Some will be, I know what to do. It's okay, I'm already famous, and things like that. Sometimes you have artists like that. So then, okay, kalau you're going to be like that, then I'll leave you to do your own stuff, right? Some artists are like, tolong help me, things like being like Ella, right? So please help me with this, help me with that, because I don't know, right? So there are artists like that. So for me, my advice is, you know what? There's always going to be somebody who's smarter than you. Learn from the smart person. Get the information from them. Get their advice. Get their support. To me, never be egotistical about, I'm famous. I know everything. I know, right? Don't, right? So because that's where you never learn, right? So yeah. So that's why I enjoy working with artists who are open to me and to say, aku tak tahu lah, teach me lah, not just because of my position, but more like because I'm able to add value to them, right? So yeah.
Like, meeting artists at different stages, especially when they're starting out. Have you encountered situations where you think like, okay, I think this artist doesn't need to be signed, whatever they're doing, they should just keep doing it. They don't need to be signed to a major or a label. Has that happened?
Are you saying that as in, I don't want to sign them?
No, meaning that, you feel that maybe there's nothing much that you can add for them at that stage of their career, or maybe it's not a good match or something like that.
Yeah. So those sort of decisions definitely happen. I would say, like for example, a certain artist who comes to me and say, I'm a DJ. But I have a wonderful career, I can make a lot of money, but I cannot support him simply because I don't have the team that does that. I don't have a division to do that. I don't know how else to do that. So there are also, I don't know how to read this situation where I say, I can't just take you on because I won't be fair to you because you're already good at what you're doing, right? So there will be situations like this too. There are also situations whereby there's certain advice to say, stay where you are to do what you're doing. Right, because there isn't enough support for that. I can't support you, or maybe certain people can't support you, things like that. So, yeah.
So meaning that I guess you encounter artists where they were doing like certain things that work, but maybe the label doesn't have the team to support that kind of genre or that kind of thing.
Or maybe even they don't believe in it, right? So there are situations like this too. There are a lot of independent artists that have actually broken in the sense that has been popular without even record label support, or at least major record label support. So there are also situations like this because they go at it on their own, and because wow, you're so independent, you're great, you're on your own. Then there's a lot of respect, a lot of fans that will say, yeah, that's great. You're anti-establishment, so-called, right? Because many times people perceive signing to major record labels as anti-establishment, right? You want to be a rebel. So there are also a lot of supporters for rebels too. So you also need to know exactly where you are in this whole thing, in the context. There are times that you want to be in that position too, right? And there are times that record labels will not be able to sign you, but yet you're able to still flourish on your own. But there will also be a time where you also realize that I still need some support from somebody because they have something that I don't have, right? Yeah. So
being in the music industry for so long, you know, I mean, without naming names, like, can you share like any like what's the darker stuff that happens? Is there anything like I wouldn't say evil, but you know, like sketchy stuff that happens in the industry? Not with you lah, obviously everything is great, right? But what happens that, you know, because people always speculate, oh, you know, this thing is wrong, but it happens anyway. Is there anything that you might be able to share, if you're comfortable?
no, let me see. How am I gonna answer that? Sketchy stuff. Okay. Of course, there are a lot of things that there are obviously lots and lots of sketchy stuff that happens. It's, you know, if you see the connotation of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's all I have to say, right? You know, all these sort of things happen, right? So I guess, I mean, the unfortunate thing with the local music industry, at least the local domestic artists, is that a lot of them do get into drugs. That to me is sad, and you know, it's probably part of escapism. It could be like, I need to keep up with everything else, and I don't want to be, you know, I want to keep up with everything else, therefore, you know, I want to be my own world and things like that. So, I mean, that's something that I totally despise, but unfortunately it happens. You know, but how much can I control? How much can I say, don't do it? It's really, you know, it's very personal, right? Is that sketchy? I don't know. But I guess my advice to, you know, some of the aspiring writers or artists is that as much as you want to be signed to a label, be signed to a label, but also understand your contractual obligation, you know, read the terms, know the clauses and stuff like that. If not, you go into a lot of issues, right? So that's one aspect I always, you know, like Warner's recording contract is 36 pages long, right? And it's because it's 36 pages long, it's also in English. Most, you know, it is actually all in English. And I sign a lot of domestic artists that do not necessarily, they're not very proficient in English. So I always make an effort to explain some of the clauses to them so that they know what they're getting themselves into. And I believe there's also an ethical part of what the record label should do, is to be able to explain all these things. Because there are lots of record labels that will just sign you, I don't care, right? And then when you start reading the fine lines and the clauses, then you realize, oh no, what did I get myself into from an artist standpoint? You know, likewise from a writer and things like that too. So something that I will always say, please know what you sign. So that's very important, because if not, you know, you're signing your life away or your career away, and people might exploit you, right? So, I mean, coming from a record label, I dare to say that because I know artists have actually been exploited before, right? You know, so what they promise verbally may not be what's written on the contract. Yeah, so which is sad. Yeah, so that also gives the industry a bit of a bad name.
Yeah.
In
terms of like this happens, I mean this happens a lot in hip hop lah. Like, you know, people have like a beef with someone. This artist doesn't like this artist, but it also creates a lot of attention. Do you see, is that something that happens here, like a manufactured beef or manufactured, like, you know, this artist doesn't like this artist, or this kind of drama?
Okay, manufactured beef is also sometimes should happen because it's manufactured, and it's like Kendrick versus Drake, right? That's basically, to me, I think it's, you know, probably manufactured, but for, you know, it's really personal. Don't know, right? But the world we live in, we have this massive appetite for things like this to happen. So if you can manage it, but I wouldn't encourage that. I wouldn't encourage that. But if you want to manufacture something, may not be controversy, but you manage certain things, you got to make sure that you have a backup plan to know how to manage that, right? Less, you know, because you don't want it to be totally out of control where it becomes adversely, you know, an adverse impact on your career. Right? So you also have to think about, if I want to do this, I've got to make sure that it is actually, I got to have a holding statement to say it's not what it is, right? That sort of thing, right? Have I done that before in my career? Not really. Sometimes you have artists fighting with artists. it happens on its own, right? And it actually helps. For whatever reason, it just helps the profile of the artist. Then people start taking sides and things like that. Then the popularity of the artist comes on. I don't think it is something that we want to actually do all the time, but when it happens, right? So yeah, but just that you know how to manage that. You need to make sure that you have a contingent plan, right? So
is there a lot of like crisis communications management in terms of for artists?
Recently, in fact, right after I left, there was a crisis that happened to an artist called Kaka.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Kaka was signed to Warner for long term. Unfortunately, she made a statement that was a bit homophobic, right?
Oh,
And that's when a decision was made by the label to let her go, as in to release her from the label, simply because from a global standpoint, in this case, Warner Music Group do not condone something like this. So it was a bit of that crisis management that we had to do. But it was actually after my time, so she asked my advice, what do I do? So I kind of advised her what to do. So she left amicably, unfortunately, or unfortunately she had to leave the label. So her contract was terminated because of something like that.
And I think another thing that's interesting for me in terms of your career progression is you've crossed different industries. So like being in music and then going to F1 and then right now in your current role, do you find that the kind of thinking that you bring from coming from a music industry guy when you go into the different brands like Adidas and F1 and do you think differently than other people?
I would say that at some point when you're trained in a certain way, you will obviously be able to use your training into something else, right? I think a good example is my transition from the music industry to Adidas. Now, Adidas, a lot of people knew that during the 90s was actually a brand that my father or your grandfather used to wear, right? Because always black and 3 white stripes and things like that. That was Adidas. That was the perception of Adidas. It wasn't as cool as Nike. Right? And I felt that during my time transiting from EMI to Adidas, what was very interesting was that I was able to infuse a lot of music and lifestyle element into Adidas, right? To make Adidas cool, right? That was when I collaborated with No Hujan, and also who else was and of course Joe Flizzo. So and also Ultimate. So I say, guys, you know what? Why don't you just all wear Adidas Originals? So that was part of what I actually was able to do in terms of making Adidas a bit relevant from a lifestyle standpoint, which they appreciated by the fact that really now it's not just about the black shoes with 3 stripes, right? So now it's a lot more colorful, and also the music element was part of it and things like that. So that kind of changed a little bit at the beginning part of my Adidas career. So yeah, so it does help. So like let's say right now I'm actually in a FMCG environment, which is fast-moving consumer goods, where it's baby products, it's wellness products, but for me, it's also really about making it a bit more relevant in terms of more lifestyle driven, rather than just boring, sell the stuff, pick it off the shelf and buy it off the shelf, that whole thing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're about to wrap up.
Okay, sure.
Before we wrap up and stuff,
No problem.
I do want to say that for anyone who is here and you're not from ICOM does have open days, and it happens on Fridays. There's how many days? Tomorrow is one, right? Tomorrow is an open day, so if anyone wants to experience the college, come and watch the Friday performance, also discover more about the programs. Or if you happen to know people that might want to study here, you can inquire with Simon at the back, or like one of the people in the team. They're raising their hands there, very curiously. Yeah. So do talk to these very nice people. They'll let you guys know about the open days. So I think I'm just gonna do one more question, and then we're gonna wrap up. Okay, 2 more questions.
No
Just
problem.
one is, when you're negotiating contracts, right?
Yeah.
Was there any clauses that an artist or the artist wanted that feels like, oh, this is crazy, or this is like, oh, this is like horror story like that? Why are you asking this?
Okay.
Anything crazy people ask?
I don't think so. You know, when you look at a contract, what would be the salient things you look at? You look at the contract period, you look at the percentage of royalties, and who's supposed to do what, and things like that, right? I don't reckon that there's something that's glaringly that you think, you know, the record labels would kind of hide in between lines to sign you, right? But as I said, you know, just be very clear to exactly what you're getting yourself into. You know, you don't want to sign a contract that's like, oh, you're signed for life with a label. Then how are you going to get out of it, right?
Yeah.
So just got to make sure that there isn't a sign for life sort of thing. And also, I would say that some of the things you want to look at will be the ownership of the masters. Now, record labels always say, if you're signed to me as an artist, then chances are I will actually own the masters. But then, as I said, as the industry evolves, what will happen is that there are also negotiations that takes place in terms of contract. Sometimes you can even end up co-owning the masters because the masters is an asset, it's valuable, it's a treasure, right? And you may want to actually have that, but not necessarily, because sometimes record labels are so powerful and, you know, in a way that they put in so much money, they say, I want to own the master. So then maybe you can do that. But at some point you are able to also, you know, contracts is also something that we literally can even spend a whole day talking about contracts, right? Yeah, because that's also a very integral part of a recording deal itself. As I said, just be aware of all the clauses, what you are getting yourself into, what you are committed to do, what you're supposed to deliver, right? Because there's also contractual obligations. If I were to say I'm supposed to do 10 singles, if I end up with 3, then of course there's a breach of contract and things like that. So you don't want to get into those sort of things.